I am super excited to invite Dr. Now I'm going to say it wrong. Am I going to say it wrong? No, I'm not.
No,
Adi Jaffe to,
perfect. That was amazing.
or see, that's what I'm saying, to the Terry Cole Show. Um, Dr. Jaffe is the best-selling author of The Abstinence Myth and a nationally recognized expert on mental health, addiction, relationships, and shame. You may have seen his TED Talk. He's done a lot of press around this and has been doing this for years. He lectured in the UCLA Psychology Department for the better part of a decade and was the executive director and co-founder of one of the most progressive mental health treatment facilities in the country until he started his online treatment experience, recovery experience, Ignited, which we'll have all the show notes for
Mm.
that. So I am so interested in talking to you about all this. So I just want to welcome you to the show. Thanks for
Thank you.
coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. All right. So let's start with, what is your recovery story?
Mm. Yeah, I'm going to tell the shorthand version of it because, as you mentioned, there are a lot of other places for people to get a
Sure.
more nuanced piece. But I ended up struggling with meth addiction. That is the thing that brought me down. I ended up going to jail, spent a year in jail. I ended up owning a gun and selling drugs and being exactly what you probably think of when you think of a life gone wrong around addiction and especially around a drug like meth. So that is where things ended up. But if I'm honest, it started with being socially anxious, uncomfortable, and not very familiar with how to even talk about or explore the nuances of what was going on between my ears from honestly the age of 8 or 9. Um, I used to go home from school when I was in elementary school, doubled over in pain, and didn't realize for years later that it was almost like an ulcer that I was experiencing already at 8 and 9 years old in elementary school from stress and anxiety. Nobody could figure out what the stomach pain was because it wasn't stomach pain, it was nerves. And I always felt like I wasn't enough. I always felt like I didn't belong. I always felt like I didn't perform well enough and people didn't like me. And that followed me for a very, very, very long time. And so um, at 14 came alcohol to help with that. And at 16 came cannabis to help some more. And each one of those really just followed, a very similar story of being in a social environment, not feeling comfortable, somebody giving me a social elixir and me trying it out and then saying, hey, if these people are into it, then I'm down. Let's try. Let's do whatever we can. And I kept living that way, kept looking for things to fix me, had breakups, and I would deal with the breakups by doing more drugs, more alcohol to deal with my pain, never becoming familiar with any tools to actually solve the problems, but instead putting more and more band-aids on them. And as I mentioned already, that ended with that SWAT team arrest that I described in my TED Talk at the age of 25, 26, that led to everything else after.
Wow. So you have a book called The Abstinence Myth. And this is sort of a very, goes against the grain, quote unquote, of traditional recovery circles. And like, that's the first thing, that you have to be willing to be abstinent. So I find
Yeah.
this super, super interesting as a psychotherapist. And I stopped drinking when I was 21 because of my own issues with alcohol, and started young as well, when I was 12, I think, probably. So trust me, people are like, you stopped when you were so young. I was like, hi, that was a long run. That was like a decade
Mhm.
of drinking way too much.
Yeah.
But my question, because I know that it's considered a very controversial stance,
It
and
is.
yet, as a psychotherapist, I've always tried to find other ways when I knew someone had some kind of a problem with numbing their feelings, which is what you're describing,
Yeah.
that I would do, like, not sober January. I know everyone's doing that now, but this is years ago. And I always chose May as like, let's do a detox. You could detox from sugar if that's your thing. You could detox from alcohol. As my therapy practice, the whole practice, I would be like, who wants to join? And
Yeah.
the people who were like, oh my God, the thought of not drinking for the whole month of May, I want to jump out a window. I'm like, okay, well, at some point we should look at that. Like, it would
Yeah.
be revealed just by the thought. So I came up with different things about like shadow addictions, I call them. So I'm very interested in how you came to what you say
Mm,
in about abstinence, about it, abstinence should not be right, the first guard at the gate of recovery, of like whether people can get in or not.
yeah, yeah, and that's a phrase I use because it's abstinence is the thing, as you mentioned, you have to commit to before you can do anything else. And first of all, we don't do that in any other field. Like, imagine if somebody wouldn't treat you for diabetes unless you committed to never eating a donut again, or if they wouldn't treat you for depression unless you made sure you were never going to be depressed again, like, or think about suicide again. Like, it sounds crazy when I talk about it in other areas of life, but we do that to people in addiction all the time. Oh, you're really serious about changing your drinking? Well, you have to commit to not drinking. Wait, we haven't done anything yet. How am I going to wake up tomorrow without the thing that I've relied on to function in life? So I'll tell you how I ended up with that conclusion, and it's partially related to my own story and partially related to the work I did. So I told you the story all the way until going to jail. I went to jail and I got out and had to really figure out what to do with my life. The path that I'd been on for a while was just not sustainable. You know, if I would have stayed in that world, I would have spent many, many more years in prison. Um, sorry, sorry about that. If I would have continued down that path, I knew what was going to happen. The people around me died. They spent decades in prison, and they started kind of living their life inside and outside. They had two different lives: the lives they lived inside jail and prison, and the life they live outside. I didn't want that, but I didn't know what else to do. I'd been living this life for 7 or 8 years since I was in high school. I didn't know anything else, and so I tried to go get a job. I couldn't get hired. Nobody hires an ex-con, and so you don't get a job. And I tried that for 6 to 9 months, and I am blessed for having my family support me along the way. But how long are you going to do that? How long are your parents just going to pay your rent for you? Um, so I had to find something else. And eventually, after literally, I think 30, 40, 50 jobs that I would either get an interview or they would tell me, oh, you seem like a great candidate. And then after the background check would never call me again because I had 9 felonies on my record. It wasn't a joke. Um, I went back to school and I hated school before. I didn't want to be back at school. I was pretty good at it younger, but I don't know, around 14 years and up, I just started rebelling against school. So I always said I would never be back in school, but that was the only option. Went and got my master's in psychology and I started studying abnormal psychology, social psychology, and listening for the first time in a long time and doing some research. And one of the things that dawned on me right off the bat, because I was incredibly studious at that point, I was committed to not spending the rest of my life in prison. So I needed to do whatever else I could. I started realizing that the things that I was hearing in the recovery community that I was in were very different than the things I was hearing in the psychology department that I was in. And then I started doing work with people who struggle with addiction, specifically homeless, primarily homeless veterans, but homeless people addicted to drugs in Long Beach, California. And I found this passion. First of all, I didn't judge them. I'd been where they were almost, and it felt like they knew me and I knew them in a way that was probably more nuanced than what it could be for a lot of other people. Um, and so that was really amazing. And secondly, I felt like I got to do good by not judging them. So that felt really amazing. And so I landed into that work. And what I realized as I started doing the work is, first of all, lifetime abstinence is rarely maintained. Hardly anybody meets that criteria. And to have people try for something that hardly ever is met seems to me like a fool's errand from the beginning. So to say to somebody, the only way you succeed with this is you quit drinking now and you quit for the rest of your life. Oh, by the way, only like 7 to 10% of people that are told that ever achieve it. It feels like you just set the bar really, really high. Now, we talk about it in these really condescending ways, in my opinion, like, they need tough love, or, you have to be real with them, or you can't coddle them. Nobody's asking you to coddle them, but I'm also not asking you to tell them that the only way to succeed is to achieve something that is rarely achieved. So that's where it started for me. And then it got worse because I won't explain exactly the details, but I did research on why don't people enter treatment. I found a number that was shocking to me, and a lot of you probably don't know this as I'm saying it right now. 90% of people who struggle with addiction problems never get professional help for them. 90% of people. So out of about 100 people in the world that you know who have struggled with addictions, only about 10 of them will ever even enter any professional treatment for it. And then only about 10% of those will actually succeed in that treatment, meeting lifelong abstinence goals. That means out of 100 people who need help, only one of them is currently succeeding based on the treatment system we have right now.
Wow.
I call that abject failure. Well, I started researching, why is it? That's insane. Why is it that only 90%, that only 10% of people go to treatment? And cost and logistics were obviously a big part of the problem. Treatment is expensive, and who can take 30, 60 days or 10, 15 hours a week out of their life? It's a big lift. But the next were shame and abstinence. People were saying, I need my life to get back on track, but I like drinking and using too much to quit. And everybody writes those people off, but that was 50 to 60% of my participants in my study. And I started thinking differently. I said, well, what if these people really do want help and they don't yet see an option of their life without drinking, or with drinking a much less, because they don't know how to handle that? But what if we were able to get them in to help their life get better? Would that change anything? And I felt so strongly about this that I actually left academia and I ran my first treatment center that you mentioned in the intro. And one of the biggest revolutionary things we did is we didn't make people decide to quit when they came in. If they wanted to continue drinking, that was one of their prerogatives. We tried to get people to abstinence sample, as you mentioned, and say, hey, can you take 30 days or 60 days off so we can work while that's happening? And then if you want to continue drinking, do that. That worked for some people. Some people had a hard time even meeting those 30 to 60-day goals. But the point was, we brought people into treatment who wouldn't have gone into other treatment because they weren't ready to quit. Now, here's the thing that is very important for everybody to understand. If we agree, and not everybody agrees on this, but if we agree that there are underlying reasons for the drinking and the using,
We agree.
okay, then the drinking is not actually even really the problem. The drinking is the thing that makes getting to the problem harder, sure, but it's not the actual problem. So why am I focusing all my effort on fixing that piece? Why not come to somebody who's been traumatized, somebody who has poor attachment, somebody who has no skills at intimacy building and relationships and therefore feels lonely and isolated all the time? Somebody who has beliefs about their low self-worth. Like, it doesn't matter. There's a myriad reasons why this would happen. But why not go to them, start working on those pieces? Because if that is the force pushing on the drinking, if you reduce the force pushing on the drinking, you will get less drinking. And I got to tell you, at Ignited, we require zero abstinence. You don't have to abstain at all. What we find, though, is within a month or two, people are drinking 50% less, 47% less, without us ever trying to get them to drink less. That, to me, is the magic. You take your eye off the problem that you think needs to be fixed, and you go to them and you ask them, what do you want help with? And you go help them with that. Magically, they drink less.
Wow, that is pretty mind-blowing statistically. That's amazing. I feel like there's something that I really like about your approach, that like not everyone is the same. And that, because from a psychotherapeutic point of view, having a practice for 2.5 decades, it's like, I know there will be some people where the idea of full abstinence, I would try with my clients. I rarely took on, like, once my practice was established, even though I stopped drinking myself and did my own version of recovery or whatever, I feel like there are people who do it better, right? It should be somewhere else. But I noticed that with people, and I imagine it's happening also with people being locked down and COVID, that there are so many high functioning people who are numbing at a high rate, and there is a cost. So there's something really, I love the inclusiveness of getting people in by not like scaring the crap out of them, and by not being like, you already suck, you didn't even get here yet, but you're already bad because you can't do it. And your work also focuses a lot on getting rid of shame. So, you said the two things that were blocking people from taking the leap, a big one was shame, the other one was abstinence. So can you talk a little bit about what you discovered about shame?
100%, 100%. Look, shame is an insidious emotion. We can trace it back to our early tribal times. If you didn't fit in and you didn't play your role, you were ostracized. And shame is the feeling of not belonging, of being different than, of not being part of, and feeling like who you are in essence, not what you do, who you are is not enough or not good enough for those around you and for the society you live in. Now, in I'll say olden times, but in back in tribal days, 15, 18, 23 people, everybody relied on one another for survival. And you kind of did need to play your role. And if you didn't, that put a lot of people at risk. We don't live in that time anymore. We live in a time where you can find a lot of people that have the same ideals as you, values as you, fetishes as you, book preferences as you, shoe, style as you, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? I live in Los Angeles. It's like the mecca of people who are a little different than everybody else. And yet this feeling exists. And a lot of us get it early in life. Like I said, I started feeling it at 8 or 9 years old. I don't know what it was, but I remember standing in front of a mirror at 8 years old saying, you're not cute enough to just get away with whatever you want to do for the rest of your life on your looks. You have to get better at something else. I have no idea what somebody said to make me stand in front of a mirror like that,
Right.
but something happened that gave me that idea. Okay. Now, how do you deal with that shame? How do you deal with feeling like you are not enough in some way? The thing is, and you mentioned this for during lockdown, but our society, I think, does this in general, is we're told to just hide. That is a solution you recommended. The recommended solution, the prescription in our society is, hey, if something's wrong, figure it out, deal with it. Maybe go buy a book. Don't talk to anybody about it. Put a smile on your face, post it on Instagram, show everybody that you're great, and give us your gratitude list for the day, right? The sort of idea of whitewashing your emotions. The only problem is that what that creates is this world where everybody thinks that everybody else is doing really, really well. But in reality, everybody is really struggling and not able to or trusting enough of others to rely on them for emotional support. Our emotional vocabulary is lacking. We don't know how to talk about our feelings because we don't even know how to feel them. Then we don't know how to communicate that to other people in a way that is not blaming. So I can't come to you and say, man, you really pissed me off yesterday, when I've made it about you. But the idea of coming up to somebody and saying, I felt really ashamed, or I felt really sad yesterday because I heard you say this thing, and it just reminded, that's a very complex, difficult thing for a lot of people to do in our society, because you're not supposed to cause noise. Well, we have noise. Our mental health is not always at 100. It fluctuates. And as you obviously know, in the psychological practice, there are two elements to this. There are techniques that have been shown to help people when they struggle in this way, but you have to talk about it. Or, I mean, there's non-talk therapy as well, but you have to come in and you have to get the help. You have to do something about it. It doesn't magically happen. That's number one. Number two, the application of those techniques becomes pretty unique and special for each person. And that is the skill of a therapist. That is what we're trying to do with Ignited with technology. And I think we're achieving massive success, and I could talk about why. But in the end, there's not a CBT patient coming to you. There's Jennifer, and Jennifer needs help, or Mike needs help. And if we start treating people, which is the problem with addiction and alcohol issues in particular, as if all people who struggle with drug are drug addicts, and we see Mike as a drug addict coming in, we've already lost the battle. Mike is not a drug addict. Mike is Mike. Mike's had experiences in his life. Now, will CBT, mindfulness, potentially hypnosis, biofeedback, nutritional changes, exercise, mindset, and belief work, will all those things help? Oh, yeah, they absolutely will. But if you don't figure out a way to communicate with Mike in a way that Mike hears it, and you say to him, look, I know these things work. If they don't work for you, there's something wrong and you don't want this badly enough.
Yeah.
You're in the wrong line of business. So for me, when it comes to shame, we have to, the professionals, it's not up to the people that we're helping to remove their own shame. I'm sorry to say it, but they're not equipped right now. We have to help them. So for instance, I want to just give one quick example, and I'll give the mic back.
No,
I had
please
a client,
go.
I had a client at Ignited who experienced a 90% reduction in her drinking. She used to drink 60 glasses of wine a week. That's 13 bottles of wine. She now drinks 6 a week, normally on 2 separate days. So about 3 glasses of wine in each one of those days. 90% improvement. I want everybody to stop and think about the last time you improved 90% on anything in your life. Just pause. You can press pause right now. Think to yourself and then come back. Imagine having that 90% improvement. Let's say you wanted to lose 50 pounds and you lost 45 pounds. You wanted to get 200 points higher on the LSAT and you got 180 points higher on the LSAT. And then she walked to
Be
her
like,
therapist.
yeah.
Walked into her therapist's office and she reported on this because she had been tracking it and she was really happy about it. And his response was, I'm still worried that you're drinking though.
Mm.
And my heart sank when she shared this in group because that is shame. That is her therapist shaming her. But I want everybody to get this, shaming her for her success.
Mhm.
She didn't fail. She's doing so much better than she was doing 2 months earlier.
Yeah.
But for this guy, and it was a man, so that's why I'm saying this. For this guy, the only version of success is perfection. Yeah. And I know you have a very smart audience. I know everybody here understands this. Perfection is an illusion.
Absolutely.
It is fleeting. And if you reach it, you should clasp your hands in a moment of nirvana and thank the universe that it gave it to you, and it'll be gone like that. And that's okay. We come in and out of levels of functioning, but if I can get 90% improvement significantly and consistently for my clients, I will celebrate that and scream it from the top of the world. And I want all of us, that's why the book is called The Abstinence Myth. I want everybody to realize improvement is improvement. We need to celebrate people doing better, not only celebrate them when they're perfect, because what happens is they're not perfect and then they lie to us.
Oh, the underreporting, the just straight up lying, as you're saying, like, I imagine that is rampant. It must be rampant because,
Rampant.
right,
I've heard
because,
statistics as
yeah.
high as something that like 30% of people, now it might be different with legalization. I've heard that as many as 30% of people who report that they're sober in traditional recovery are not sober and are using something else, like
Mhm.
an anti-anxiety medication or marijuana, or they're just using something, microdosing with psilocybin now, doing ketamine treatments. 30%. That's just a number I've heard floated around, but it's like people lie to us, and they're not lying because they're liars. People, we need to understand this. They're
Yeah,
lying because they know that if they tell us the truth, we'll shame them.
right. I think there's something really profound about what you're saying and about, the way that you've gone on this. And of course, what I love about your approach is that, listen, it opens it up to everyone because we all learn differently. We all, if we're in denial about what we need to do, what I found when I was doing like harm reduction type techniques with clients
Yep.
is, again, I would do it in a less direct and threatening way. And I would see if, people could give it a go for a period of time, or if bad things always happened. When one particular client was drinking hard alcohol, I was like, hey, what would it be like if that was kind of off the table, but you could still drink wine or whatever? And with that particular client, their bad incidences, they're blacking out, the things that were happening when they took hard alcohol off the table stopped happening. And so for that person, that was a win to
Oh
me
my
because they
God.
were in pain about the incidences. And I was like, all right, but what is the common denominator? Every time this bad thing happens, you are drinking hard alcohol. So anyway, I think that there's
Great.
so many more people will benefit if you're inviting them in. Like, learn. There's so much psychoeducation, there is so much addiction education that it sounds like you're doing, understanding these underlying factors.
Yeah. I mean, I love that you use that example because so many people are like, they talk about, there's actually a line in the big book that half measures avail us nothing. And a lot of people use that with me a lot. Well, you're telling people that there's an easier, soft way to do this, that half measures will get them where they want to go. First of all, I got news for all the people who think half measures availed them nothing. Half measures got you to the place where you got to full measures. So half measures didn't avail you nothing. They were part of the freaking journey. Just accept it. Rarely, it happens every once in a while, but rarely do I ever hear somebody who woke up in the morning, said to themselves, man, I really got to quit my drinking, went to an AA meeting, and from that moment on has never drank before. Does it happen? I'm sure it does, but I guarantee the numbers are in single percentage points. For the rest of people, it was back and forth and trying and slipping up and doing this, and it didn't work. And then they did AA or something else and meditation or therapy, medication, and all of a sudden they got it all together. Half measures are exactly the way where you get to the end. And then the other piece is, how is working on your inner demons and the things that you really struggle with the easier, softer way? This is the hardest work people normally do. It has nothing to do with being an easier, softer way. It actually has to do with being the more complete, comprehensive way. And I love the example you gave, because here's what you did for your client. What you did is you said, look, drinking's not the problem. Blackouts are the problem. What's causing the blackouts? Oh, it seems like there's a thread. Now, if you would have said to your client, it seems like the thread is alcohol and you have to cut alcohol out, they would have run the other way.
Yep.
What you said, you actually did the work. You actually thought about it. You said, it seems like the hard liquor is a problem. Okay. What if we took that off the table? Let me try that. For your client to go from, I don't know what to do about this, to let me try that is a massive move. That motivation to go from pre-contemplation to contemplation and then action is massive, right? And so now you're in conversations with them. And if the hard liquor didn't stop the blackouts, a new conversation. If it does, then now you have a client who is not blacking out. And by the way, people do a lot of really crazy stuff when they're blacking out. So it's really nice to stop them from doing it.
Mhm.
Now you got a client who's not blacking out. Now the conversation get more nuanced. Now they come to you and they say,
Yep.
I don't like, yeah, sorry, go ahead. It's
Well,
just
no, you
beautiful.
just, I mean, from a therapeutic point of view, I'm looking like, what are the blocks to the conversations we need to have? What are the blocks to this person being able to access their own emotional experiences? And even if they don't have all the right language, right? What ends up happening is that when I can't get there because we can't um, make the presenting problem of I'm blacking out, let's say, or I'm driving drunk or whatever I'm doing, all of our time is spent. Hence why I really stopped working with people, you know, if I really knew they needed to be in addiction treatment of some kind with someone who had more experience,
Mm,
because it's like your whole life with them, you're literally putting out the fires that they are light. Literally, they're putting paper, they're putting kerosene and lighting. And then they're like,
yeah.
oh my God, here's a fire. I'm like,
Mm,
how, you're like,
yeah, I've definitely worked with a lot of clients like that. I
yeah.
have.
And it doesn't feel like for me, it didn't feel like I was doing them a service. And I also can't deal because it's just, it's like I can't have that same conversation over and over. And the same thing with people in relationships with addicts, where they want to talk about the end result of someone's blacked out behavior, where they're like, you're not going to believe what Bob did. I'm like, dude, I believed you the first time you told me Bob was a raging alkie and like crashed the car. I'm going to believe it. You seem to be the only person who was like,
Mm,
it's so hurtful that Bob would say that. I was like, wait, back to what is the common denominator? Would
mm,
Bob have said those things if Bob were not blackout wasted? Would he have?
yeah.
Well, no. I'm like, okay, then why are we making it Bob's feelings about you,
Yeah.
the
Yep.
thing
And
in
even
this
and
moment,
even and even on another note, because I'm sure a lot of people listening right now are not the ones struggling, but know somebody who's struggling. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing that is really important for people to hear is this: when you're in relationship with somebody, it's a two-way street. And a lot of people think that if somebody has a drug problem or an alcohol problem, you will send them somewhere, they'll do whatever black box magic they do in that black box, and then they'll bring them back to you, and the person will be fixed, and the relationship will be good, and you'll walk off into the sunset. Here's the reality: you are part of that relationship. And whether you like it or not, there are things you're doing that are triggering, enabling, creating the environment where this is possible. There are
Mm-hmm.
a million different ways that we can look at this. But your relationship to that person, your relationship to their drinking, your relationship to your own demons, your own trauma, your own struggles, your own early developmental experiences in childhood is also going to have to change. I give a very clean example in the Ignited program. And I talk about your family and your relationships are like a cast in a show. And if you watch a TV show, imagine Friends, right? If you watch Friends, I'm old enough for that to be the show that I reference. I don't know what people would reference nowadays. And you look at Chandler, and Chandler's like the goofy guy who just nobody really takes seriously, but he's nice and everybody likes him, and he's very friendly. Um, Imagine that in the middle of an episode, Chandler shows up and he's just an a-hole. Like from the beginning on, he's just, nobody gets it. And they're looking at him like crazy. He went from this funny, loving, silly guy to just being like the Joker, like the worst guy on the face of the earth. Do you imagine that all the other characters would be able to stay in the exact same roles that they were in before? Of course not. Because either Chandler has to go back to the way that he was before, or everybody else also has to change. Because now we've got this a-hole in the middle of the show and we got to deal with it. We can't just imagine that he didn't exist. Here's how this relates back to your life. Whatever this person is in their role, if you think that they're going to go somewhere else, get fixed and come back, they're walking into the same cast. They're walking into the same show. Everybody's going to expect them, get triggered by, do the same, and enable them in the same ways as before. And
Mhm.
unless you do your own deep work to
Mhm.
understand why you react to them in the way that they do, and then boundaries come up. I mean, I see, boundary boss, right? Boundaries come up, and your deep attachment work. I mean, there's stuff you're going to need to figure out, because when they come back, even slightly altered, you better be ready to start engaging in a different way. And in that way, it's a dance, and you have to learn how to dance together. You can't send them away to teach a different dance and then expect us all to be able to do that.
It's so good. I love to say, you're 50%, like only 50% of every single relationship that you're in, because it's the only percentage you can actually be. So even if we have an identified patient in a relationship where you're like, oh, it's them, they're the problem, I'm always teaching, okay, but then we have to look in and go, okay,
Mm.
what is my 50% of what is happening? Where am I in colluding with the lowest impulse in this person? Where am I enabling, or whatever the thing is? And again, it's not about blame. It's about the fact that boundaries are a dance, relationships are a dance. We have this particular way that we interact. And when somebody gets sober, when somebody changes, and even in the getting sober, if they reduce their intake 90%, right, they're successful at doing that. What they needed to do when they were drinking 30, however much your client was drinking a week, right? 30 glasses or whatever it is, what you were doing to collude with that, they're not going to be doing that anymore. If that person is now drinking 6 glasses a week, you don't need all those hours. It doesn't take so long to drink 6 glasses. You know what I mean?
Yes. And here's what I see happening a lot. And it's what happened to that therapist, right? That therapist um, was triggered and was reacting to the fear he had about my now client returning to her old behavior.
Mhm.
But she hasn't in a few months. And she's coming to report a win. And what he let get in the way was his fears about what may happen to her. And what I'm saying, and this is exactly what you just mentioned in that dance, what he doesn't realize is he is bringing her back into the old dance by saying, no, 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 you don't get to do this new dance. This new dance is not okay. We got to go back to the old way we were dancing, even as his job is to get her to learn a new dance. So the whole thing he's trying to do is get her to go somewhere else. And he's being tethered and pulled back. And that happen if trust me, if that happens in professional relationships, it happens in people's everyday real life relationships. And you're so right that we have to constantly examine and be aware. Why do I get triggered? Why is it that when my wife is late, I get triggered to a respect thing? What happens? And then I get to do work on that, and I can communicate it with her. But rarely, every once in a while, this might work for you, but rarely do you get to change somebody else. What you can change is yourself, your reaction to the other person, and the environment in which you have that relationship. And then they either change to adapt or not. And that can tell you a lot about the relationship.
Oh yeah, I love that. I really do think though that when we are in relationships with people who are addicted to substances of any kind, there's a particular, our own sort of responsibility. And again, it's not blaming, it's just the truth that we're dancing with someone. I heard this years ago, and you've probably heard it before, but I hadn't heard it because I have a lot of alcoholism in my family, a lot of people in recovery. And I once heard someone say, alcoholics don't have relationships, they take hostages.
Mm.
And that was probably the most, it resonated. I just remember I burst into tears because it's so hard when you love a lot of addicts and you're trying to save them and you're the enabler, but you don't get it and you don't know. And years of therapy later, of course, I've figured that out. But it's so painful because you
when you're
are
in
put
it.
in that, yeah, when you're in it, right? And you're put in that position too of feeling like you have to save. So I think that what you're talking about is also changing the paradigm of sort of looking at an addict as a addiction itself, as this is literally the only way that works. And if you cannot come in saying you will do it this way, that you don't really want it, you don't want it bad enough, and that you get what you deserve, sort of like tough
Mhm.
love, if we're looking at
Uh-huh.
tough love, right?
100%, yeah.
So I don't think that works so good. Statistics will agree with what you're saying about it. And I do encourage, I super appreciate you spending so much time with us here today. I find it a fascinating conversation. I would love to continue
Mm.
it another time, honestly.
Sure, sure.
Um, you guys, we're going to put all kinds of stuff in the show notes where you can find Adi and all of his people, Dr. Jaffe. So you've got a 14-day right now, a free trial.
Yeah, you can try everything we do free for 14 days and join the community and see if the content and this way of thinking works for you.
So that's ignited, and that is we're going to put all this info in the show notes for you guys. Even if you're just, I love to be like, are you alcohol addiction curious? Like, it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be that you're committed or that like, my life is a shit show. It doesn't have to be that. It can be, I want to learn more. I want to have a higher functioning skill level, right?
Yeah. That's why we introduced the trial, to be honest, is it's hard to make people take the leap. And so we wanted to make it a hop instead of a leap and make it easy to do. But yeah, look, over 60% of people come to us not to quit, they come to reduce. As I mentioned, they experience about 50% reductions on average within about a month or two. And so that means some people are releasing 90%, like I mentioned, and some people are only reducing by 15 or 20%. But people's goals are different. And then the other thing that I think is beautiful for everybody to hear, because you use the entryway, and I think that's an important thing to understand. Some people who come to moderate decide to abstain. And
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful lesson for people to hear. We feel like we have to force the issue, but it's not working. It's just not working. You know, more and more people are dying every year. We
Yeah.
double the rate of deaths from drugs about every decade. And I think, unfortunately, it's not because quote unquote addicts are getting worse. It's because our system isn't working and it's pushing them farther and farther away from the help. So my job, my role, the way I see it, is to make help as easy as possible to get. And then, yes, tailor for each person the techniques and the approaches that they like, and then just give them that.
Well, it has been such a pleasure. I super appreciate you spending this time with us today. You guys, everything you need, you can also get a free copy of The Abstinence Myth at theabstinenceMyth.com/free book dash 2.0. But don't worry, you don't have to remember that. We're going to put that all in the show notes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your information, your life experience with us. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Terry. It was a pleasure.
Right on.